Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're jumping straight into a really brutal slice of American history. We're looking at the Ohio and Mississippi rivers during what some call the golden age of flatboating.
Right, roughly 1795 to 1820. And while it was golden for commerce, for the people on those boats, it was incredibly dangerous.
Yeah, not just snags and currents, right? We're talking about human predators.
Exactly. River pirates, highwaymen, the rivers and the trails like the Natchez Trace were basically crawling with them.
So our mission in this deep dive is to unpack the real, authenticated stories of the most infamous criminals of that time, the ones whose crimes really shaped that frontier experience.
And you can't really talk about this era without talking about one specific place, Cave in Rock.
Ah, yes, the infamous lair. For anyone who doesn't know, paint us a picture. Where is it? Why was it such a perfect spot for, well, bad guys?
Okay, so Cave in Rock is this huge natural cave right on the northern bank of the lower Ohio River. French explorers noted it way back in 1729, called it Caverne dans le Roc. But it really became notorious around 1795 as an outlaw hangout. And its advantages were just undeniable. It gave amazing shelter deep inside the rock.
And the location itself.
Perfect for ambushes. It sits high enough that lookouts could see boats coming from miles away, up or down the river. No one could really sneak past. Plus, the outlaws had the high ground, strategically speaking.
Now, the sources we've looked at are pretty clear that not all the criminals using this cave were the same. They had different styles, I guess.
Absolutely not the same. You really have to draw a distinction. You had figures like Samuel Mason, who was more of a, let's say, traditional highwayman or pirate leader, organized, motivated by profit.
Okay, the professional criminal.
Right. And then you had the harps.
The harps. Our sources called them arch criminals among criminals. It sounds like they weren't just after money. They seemed to enjoy the violence itself, just terrifying.
Utterly terrifying. Judge James Hall described them as driven by a savage thirst for blood. No profit motive needed, apparently. And you can imagine how that distinction played out for settlers.
Yeah, the difference between maybe losing your cargo and definitely losing your life, that must have created a tense paranoia.
Absolutely. It defined the fear in that territory.
Okay, let's dig into Samuel Mason first. You said he was more traditional, but his background wasn't exactly criminal, was it?
No, not at all. He was actually a former captain in the Continental Army, fought in the Ohio County Militia during the Revolution.
A war hero turned pirate. How does that happen?
Well, around 1797, he takes over Cave in Rock as his base of operations. And he doesn't just hide there, he turns it into a surprisingly sophisticated enterprise.
How so? How did he actually trap people? It wasn't just ambushing from the shadows.
No, and this is key. It was an early form of organized crime with a legitimate-looking front. Mason put up this big, rough sign right on the riverbank.
A sign? What did it say?
It advertised his place as a liquor vault and house for entertainment.
Seriously, he was advertising his pirate lair as a tavern.
Pretty much. He was luring boat captains, their crews, passengers ashore with the promise of drinks, maybe a meal, some rest, hospitality.
And once they were inside,
the trap was sprung. His lookouts had already spotted potentially rich boats coming downriver. Now he had the victims isolated, inside the caves, completely vulnerable.
Clever. And what about his approach to violence? Did he have a code or?
He seemed to view it pragmatically. He reportedly told some mail carriers he intercepted that he did not desire to kill any man. Said money was all he was after.
So violence only if necessary.
That was the claim. He'd shed blood only if he had to get the money. He was a robber, making a calculation. Very different from the harps.
But he didn't stay at Cave in Rock forever despite it being such a great spot. Why leave?
Well, things started getting hotter. Posses were getting better organized. Plus, a lot of his own men, who took loot south to sell just, vanished. Never came back.
So maybe meeting their own grisly ends downriver?
Could be. Or maybe just running off with the money. Either way, Mason likely feared being captured himself. So sometime between 1797 and 1799, he abandoned the Ohio River.
And a river pirate leaves the river. Where does he go?
He pivots. He moves his operation to the mainland route, the Natchez Trace.
Ah, the Trace. That makes sense.
Yeah, think about it. Flatboat crews sell their goods down in Natchez or New Orleans. They can't easily sail back upriver, so they walk or ride back north.
Carrying all their earnings, pure cash.
Exactly. The rich proceeds of the river trade, as the sources put it. So Mason just shifted his business model from river piracy to highway robbery, targeting these guys heading home rich.
Okay, so if Mason represents the calculating, organized side of frontier crime, then the Harp brothers, Micajah, known as Big Harp, and Wiley, Little Harp, They represent something else entirely. Pure chaos.
Pure frontier madness is a good way to put it. Their reign of terror was relatively short, mostly 1798 to 1799, but it left scars across Kentucky and Tennessee.
And known for what kind of crimes?
Just brutal, often senseless violence. Unmeaning and unprovoked murders, one source says. They killed men, women, children, enslaved people. Sometimes to cover their tracks, sometimes, it seems, just because they could.
That savage thirst for blood you mentioned?
Exactly. Judge Hall really nailed it.
And what's critical here for you listening is that this isn't just campfire legend. The Harps' brutality is actually documented in court records. Tell us about the Langford murder.
Right. This case from late 1798 really grounds their story, in fact. They were captured after murdering a man named Thomas Langford. They were caught along with the 3 women who traveled with them.
3 women.
Yes, Susanna Roberts, Sally Roberts, who were sisters, possibly wives or captives, it's unclear, and Elizabeth Walker, who also went by Betsy Harp.
And the court records.
We have records found later, in 1918, from Lincoln County, Kentucky. They confirm witness testimony, like from David Irby and John Ferris, identifying Langford's body. Specifically, they ID'd him because he was missing a front tooth.
Those specific details really bring it home. And there's another detail about the women after they were jailed in Danville. That's just grim.
It really highlights the harshness of that frontier life. While the Harp brothers were jailed, within about 100 days, each of the 3 women gave birth.
Each of them in that jail.
Each one. 3 babies born in a rough frontier jail under those circumstances. The records apparently refer to them, chillingly, as the branded fruit of awful parentage.
Unbelievable. But the Harp brothers themselves didn't stay jailed for long, did they?
No, they escaped in March 1799, and they went right back to their bloody work. There's a story that shows just how monstrous Big Harp was, even towards, well, potentially his own children.
What happened?
As they were fleeing, apparently being pursued, the babies were crying. Big Harp supposedly proposed killing all 3 infants to silence them and speed up their escape.
He wanted to kill the babies.
That's the report. The only thing that stopped him was the sudden appearance of their pursuers, forcing them to run immediately. It's just sickening.
How many people did they actually kill? Is there any estimate?
Before Big Harp was finally hunted down and killed in September 1799, just a few months later, he reportedly confessed. The numbers vary slightly, but somewhere between 20 and 31 people.
20 to 30 people in just over a year? That's staggering.
Imagine the terror that induced in isolated settlements. 1 or 2 guys capable of that kind of random slaughter.
So how did Big Harp finally meet his end? It sounds like frontier justice was pretty rough itself.
It was brutal. The pursuit was led by determined men, including a Squire McBee and Moses Stegall. Stegall had a personal vendetta. The Harps had murdered his wife and child.
Oh, wow. So this was personal.
Deeply personal. When they finally cornered Big Harp, he was shot and wounded. Stegall didn't wait for any legal process.
What did he do?
He walked up to the wounded Big Harp and decapitated him on the spot.
Decapitated him?
Yes. Then he apparently put the head in his provision sack, his wallet, and carried it back to a place called Robertson's Lick. They stuck it up on display as a warning, a gruesome trophy.
Good Lord. And the body.
Just left unburied where he fell, in Muhlenberg County, Kentucky. Food for the wolves.
It's hard to process that level of immediate, visceral vengeance today, but it certainly shows the depth of fear and hatred they inspired.
Absolutely. And that very desperation for any kind of justice, however rough, actually sets the stage for how this first wave of intense highway robbery starts to wind down, with a really dark, ironic twist.
Okay, so Big Harp is dead. What happens to Little Harp, Wiley? He escapes again, right?
He does. He disappears for a while, apparently using aliases like Seton, or sometimes his mother's maiden name, Roberts. And this is where the story takes another turn.
How does the era of piracy finally start closing?
It involves Little Harp, ironically, acting out of the same motive that drove Samuel Mason money. He teams up with another outlaw, a guy named James May.
Okay.
And what do they decide to do? They decide to track down Samuel Mason. Remember, Mason had fled the Ohio and was now robbing people in the Natchez Trace.
Right. Mason, the professional.
And by this time, Mason had a pretty hefty reward on his head.
Yeah.
Dead or alive.
Wait a minute. Don't tell me.
Yep. Little Harp, the guy known for motiveless killing, decides to hunt down and kill Samuel Mason, the guy who supposedly only killed if necessary for the reward money.
That is wow. The pure killer takes out the professional robber purely for cash.
Exactly. It happened around 1803 near Natchez. They killed Mason, and crucially, they needed his head to claim the reward. So they brought Mason's severed head to Greenville, Mississippi.
The ironies just keep piling up. But did they get away with it? Did they get the reward?
Here's where it gets even stranger. They do present the head, but then they get arrested themselves.
Arrested for Mason's murder?
No,
No.
not initially. They get arrested because someone recognizes their horses.
They're horses. You're kidding.
Nope. Apparently, their horses had some kind of peculiar blaze on their faces, a distinctive marking. A traveler spotted the horses, recognized them from descriptions possibly related to other robberies, and raised the alarm.
So they weren't caught because they were the infamous Harp and his associate, or because they brought in Mason's head, but because of their horses' markings.
That's the story. An unbelievable twist of fate. They were then tried and convicted for highway robbery, interestingly enough.
And the sentence?
They were both hanged. Little Harp, alias Seton, and James May. Hanged in Greenville, Mississippi, February 1804.
And did they get the head on a pole treatment, too?
They did. Keeping with the grim tradition, their heads were cut off and placed on poles along the Natchez Trace. A final graphic warning to anyone else thinking of taking up the trade.
So the Harps are gone, Mason is gone. Does that mean the organized crime element disappears from Cave and Rock and the Trace?
Not quite. The really brutal random violence of the Harps is over, and the major river piracy of Mason is done. But the rot runs deeper. There's still the fascinating, unsettling case of James Ford.
Ah, the Ford's ferry mystery. He sounds completely different from the others.
He was the polar opposite in public persona. Ford owned Ford's Ferry, located just upriver from Cave and Rock. He was wealthy, a respected landowner, even served as a justice of the peace.
A pillar of the community.
Outwardly, yes, but secretly. He was allegedly the leader of a very successful band of highwaymen and potentially river pirates, too. He used his respectable status as the perfect cover.
How did he manage that? How do you run a robbery gang while being the local judge?
He was smart, a master of PR, you might say. He made sure the roads near his ferry were kept in good condition. He advertised his ferry crossing as safe and reliable.
Building trust?
Exactly. And then, when robberies inevitably did happen on the roads his gang controlled, the rumor always conveniently spread. Oh, that terrible robbery. Don't worry, Jim Ford found the culprits and ran them right out of the country.
Protecting his own operation by pretending to be the crime fighter. That's audacious.
It was incredibly effective for years. But his downfall eventually came, though not through official channels.
What happened?
It started with a feud he had with his own ferryman, a man named Simpson. One of Ford's known associates, a guy named Henry C. Schaus, ended up murdering Simpson.
Okay, so things are getting messy.
Very. And shortly after Simpson's murder, in 1833, Ford himself was ambushed. He was sitting on the porch at Simpson's widow's house, reading a letter in the dark. Someone shot him, straight through the heart.
Killed him. Who did it?
Nobody knows, or at least nobody was ever charged. Just like with many crimes in that area, no official investigation was really made. The killer vanished into the fog of lawlessness. The community was likely too scared, or maybe too complicit, to push for answers.
Wow. So even the respectable criminal mastermind meets a violent, mysterious end. Before we wrap up, you mentioned there was a third type of outlaw using the Cave and Rock area too, right? Not just pirates and highwaymen.
That's right. We should briefly touch on the counterfeiters, the coiners.
Economic crime, then.
Yeah, less about direct violence, more about undermining the economy. Their main tactic was to buy goods off passing flatboats, using fake coins or counterfeit currency. They'd make the transaction, get the real goods, and then disappear before the fake money was discovered.
Were there any notable counterfeiters?
A couple are mentioned. Philip Alston was apparently known as a more gentlemanly counterfeiter, whatever that means. And then there was a guy named Duff, who sounds like quite a character. He was known for being a clever strategist. There's one story where he was being chased by lawmen and actually used a big iron kettle he found as a makeshift shield against their bullets.
Resourceful. So these counterfeiters represent another layer of the criminal ecosystem there.
Exactly. It wasn't just one thing. It was robbery, murder, and fraud, all thriving in that environment.
So what finally brought this whole era of intense lawlessness around Cave and Rock to a close? Was it Ford's death? The counterfeiters getting caught?
It seems to be a combination of things around the early 1830s. There was a significant attack on the fortified home of a counterfeiter named Sturtevant in 1831, showing that organized citizens were fighting back more effectively.
Right, the community pushing back.
And then the final sort of legal bookend was the capture and execution of Henry C. House, the man who murdered Ford's ferryman Simpson.
Ford's associate, he finally faced justice.
He did. He was convicted and hanged in Golconda, Illinois in June 1834. But there's a chilling postscript to his story that hints at how deep the corruption went.
What's that?
While in jail awaiting execution, House apparently dictated a full history of the Ford's ferry robber band to his attorney, a Judge Fowler, naming names, detailing crimes.
A deathbed confession, essentially, that could have exposed everything.
Exactly. But after Hersaus was hanged, Judge Fowler started receiving threats, serious threats. He claimed he was forced to destroy the entire manuscript.
Destroyed it? Why?
Because, according to Fowler, Schaus's confession implicated some of the wealthiest and most prominent citizens in the region, people who are still alive and powerful.
So the full extent of the network, possibly reaching into the respectable society, was deliberately covered up.
It strongly suggests the criminal network wasn't just river trash and backwoods killers. It had roots in the power structure itself, which makes the whole Ford story even more plausible.
Okay, so this whole deep dive paints a picture of just utter chaos and a breakdown of trust along the Ohio and Mississippi during that period. What's the big takeaway for us looking back?
I think the key thing to understand is that the sheer horror inspired by these criminals, the Masons, the Harps, the Fords, all of them, paradoxically, helped build the society that eventually replaced them.
How so?
Because the constant dread, the violence, the betrayals, it forced the ordinary peaceful settlers to band together. They had to cooperate for mutual protection. They had to start forming regulators, posses, demanding courts and law enforcement. That shared fear became a catalyst for establishing law and order.
So the extreme lawlessness, in a way, necessitated the creation of its opposite.
Right. It was an ugly, brutal, but maybe necessary phase in the taming of that part of the frontier.
And maybe a final thought for you to chew on, something that really captures the tragedy and the paranoia of that time.
There's a dark local tradition often associated with the Ford's ferry gang or similar outfits operating inns along the trails. It concerns a man named Billy Potts.
Okay, what's the story?
The legend goes that Potts ran an inn, possibly near the Natchez Trace, and like many innkeepers of the time, was suspected of sometimes robbing and murdering wealthy travelers who stayed the night.
A common suspicion back then.
A very common one. Anyway, the story says that one night a traveler arrived, well-dressed, seemingly wealthy, but disguised or unrecognized by Potts. Potts, seeing an opportunity, murdered the man in his sloop for his money.
Okay.
Only later, going through the man's belongings, did Potts discover the horrifying truth.
What was it?
The man he had just murdered was his own son, a son who had left home years before, made his fortune elsewhere, and was finally returning home, perhaps wanting to surprise his father.
He killed his own son without recognizing him.
That's the legend. Whether literally true or not, it perfectly encapsulates the era's tragedy. The environment had become so toxic with suspicion, greed, and violence that the most fundamental human bond that between a parent and child could be completely erased by the instinct to rob and kill. It's a chilling illustration of what happens when trust completely collapses.